Thank you for joining us today on the Afternoon Constitutional. We're going to talk about some of the traditional things we talk about, and then also get into something we don't normally get into, which is August 12th, 2017. Well, we haven't since we've rebooted this show. We're going to kick off, though, as Title 42 ends. I've been struck with a very concerning feeling, and one of the great civil rights fighters in the world, he's right here in Charlottesville with us. He is John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute. John, thank you so much for taking some time out with us. How are you doing, sir?
Busy as usual, watching our country spiral downward. Freedom is hanging in the balance. I mean, it's like someone's taking them up to be hung, and freedom's going to be hung soon, in my opinion, the way things are going. I mean, I've been in constitutional law for over 40 years, and I'm just amazed at how fast people are giving up their freedoms, by the way. And it's very, very scary. The First Amendment's going down, the Fourth Amendment's going down. Everything that we were warned about, the Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson, is going away. I mean, people don't believe in free speech anymore, and the police are doing whatever they want to do these days, entering homes and stuff. More we'll talk about in a minute.
Well, and what begins my thought on this, and what begins my concern about this, is what we're watching at the southern border as almost a trigger to get us. What was it? Paul Harvey said back in the 60s in a wonderful narrative. He said, if Uncle Sam has ever done it's going to be an inside job. And I think George Mason also felt very concerned that the only way to do in a free society is to have them willingly give up their liberties and their freedoms, John. And I'm looking at the southern border, and I made the statement that we're deploying U.S. troops, albeit at this point clerically, to the southern border. But this is, to me, I'm concerned. I imagine it's only a hair to what you're concerned about as we normalize the idea of deploying U.S. troops inside the country's borders. The next time it'll be, well, we're going to protect the schools with them. And the next time it'll be, we're going to deploy them downtown. And pretty soon, posse comitatus has gone right out the window. And we've applauded it because we said, great, we secured the southern border, even though we have systems in place, as far as I'm concerned, to do that, correct?
Well, listen, if you want a good detailed commentary, it's our commentary called Danger Within. Came out May 10th. Go to our website, rutherford.org, read it. We go into all the facts. But the 2,000 mile southern border now is a constitution-free zone, they're calling it. And there's a 4,000 mile northern border that's being called a constitution-free zone, where agents are going into people's homes now, searching their homes for illegal immigrants. If you happen to be driving down the street and the police think you look unusual, they can follow you at home and enter your home. Now, listen, the people who wrote our Constitution, the Fourth Amendment says the government's not supposed to enter our homes. That's what the British were doing. They were beating people up. They were doing the same exact things that we're seeing today. And as I'm looking at what I'm seeing, it's also very interestingly like Nazi Germany, what I'm seeing today. And I've written about in my book, Battlefield America, the War on the American People. I go into that, and I'm just a little shocked at how easily people fall into line. And people in Nazi Germany, by the way, just fell into line when Hitler declared that the Jews could no longer have guns. That's okay. A couple of years later, they were in concentration camps. And it moves quickly, folks. It moves very quickly. But if you're distracted by the mainstream media, the corporate media, which we know, if you got half a brain, is run by the government. It's been run by the government since around World War I, by the way. There's studies that show that they took over the media, the government, in the early days. Obama admitted he hired behaviorists to nudge, he called it, the American people. To nudge? Is the government supposed to be nudging us? I thought they were to serve and protect us. No, they don't. So the idea is there is a group called the Deep State. There was a detailed study by Princeton University that showed that basically all the money, the big money congregates in Washington, D.C., it's run, the so-called deep state's run by 585 billionaires that want money and control. It's really scary if you think about it. It's very much like that movie by John Carpenter called They Live. There's just this secret undergirding that's controlling the media. And the average American, by the way, is like a zombie. By the way, I'm sorry to say that when I talk to them. They have 150 hours of television a month. The average American will watch, and I'm saying if you're watching mainstream media, you're nuts because you're getting a bunch of bull crap.
Mm-hmm.
You're being indoctrinated into believing that everything's glorious and wonderful. 80,000 SWAT team raids where police are busting through doors, shooting people, dogs, and doing all the things they're doing today. That if you'd have told John Adams, George Washington, who said, "Do not have a standing army on American soil," when you have 60,000 federal customs agents, and now you have 1,500 troops being deployed to the southern border, you have Biden, almost 100,000 new IRS agents armed with bullets. You have the Social Security Administration armed with hollow point bullets and guns.
Why?
You go through the list, and we've done it in our commentaries to try to wake people up. But listen, what we need in this country is a new revolution. It has to be peaceful, I'm telling you, because they are armed and they're waiting. By the way, they have training centers in Atlanta and around the country where the military trains with the police, the local police, getting ready to blow you away. But the one thing they don't like is people getting together in groups and taking over their local governments. Cities like Charlottesville, wherever you go, you can take over your local governments. And what's the 10th Amendment say, folks? Does anybody know that? It says that the local governments can nullify acts of the federal government. Mm-hmm. Wow, boy, you have some power, folks. Why do the police in Charlottesville anywhere have MRAPs, grenade launchers, and all those things? Why are they deploying those? What are they for? I mean, is America all that violent? Really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
No, it isn't. It isn't that violent. No, not compared to other places. But listen, we're being influenced by a lot of things outside the country. The Chinese are having a tremendous impact. Chinese government. I mean, Snowden just said it a couple months ago. He says, "I'm shocked at how much China's influencing the world now." Mm-hmm. You have their Confucius Institutes at various colleges across the country where they're teaching people about how great the Chinese government is. You have a Chinese police station, at least one in New York City. I know there's probably more throughout. What are they doing on American soil? I thought this was America, the land of the free, the home of the brave.
Well, what? Yeah, and you bring up, I think, one of the most seminal issues in this, and we're visiting with John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute, rutherford.org, and please, get all of these commentaries in his books as well. When you talk about what Franklin and Jefferson would have believed, George Mason did believe this. George Mason was adamant. As much as people wonder whether Patrick Henry was just worried about losing his authority as governor of Virginia when they pushed back against the Constitution, George Mason was truly concerned that if you put that power somewhere, sometime, somebody would figure out how to get around it. This is why, and we on this program, I'm an ardent supporter and member of the Convention of States Project, trying to rein in at least this federal bureaucracy through the power of the purse in the states, and to get the states' rights back. It's one of those ideas that people say, "Oh, I don't know, I don't like it," but it's written into the U.S. Constitution. It's not even something that's an uprising or insurrection. It was mandated in the Constitution that the states had the right to amend the Constitution on their own if the centralized government got out of control, and we've seen it. You mentioned China. The Belt and Road Initiative is learned at the hands of the Reconstructionist Americans who just who bought their way around all these prohibitions, John.
Yeah, and again, when money starts running the show, and it does run the show, there was another study that came out of SMU showed that the professors tried to figure out where psychopaths that congregated. It was Washington, D.C. And you're talking to someone who sued in and out of Washington, D.C. for 40 years. Very corrupt. But here's the key. Here's the key to the future. I keep telling you, I say we need a peaceful revolution. But we're going to have to teach our kids. I talk to kids. I've talked to kids in Charlottesville, around the country when I speak. Can you give me the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment? And I had one student who came to me who was a University of Virginia law student. She was studying with our summer intern program. She said, "I'm shocked. What happened to me in constitutional law?" I said, "What happened to you?" She said, "Our professor said this year, one thing we will not be studying in constitutional law, the First Amendment.
How
She
can
said,
you
that's
do
why I
that?
came to the Rutherford Institute. I said, you're kidding me. This is crazy. The First Amendment is the key to everything: the right to speak back, the right to protest, and the right to know what you're talking. You should know what the Fourth Amendment stands for. Should we be allowing government agents on American soil to be enter people's homes because they may look like an immigrant? You're kidding me. That
Mm-hmm.
gives them an amazing amount of power. And we shouldn't be doing that stuff, folks. What did George Washington say? Do not have a standing army on American soil.
Mm-hmm.
There are several 100,000 federal agents running around now, armed with hollow point bullets, armor, and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What in the hell are they expecting? They're not, they want one thing: control. They want to make sure that we keep our heads down, get our butts in the house, be afraid, and get away from them. But we're not supposed to be afraid of a cop. I told people this: if you're afraid when a cop, you see a light going behind you, it's a police car. If you're afraid, you don't live in a free country.
Mm-hmm.
That guy works for you, folks. Don't get into this baloney that somehow the government's taking care of me. No, they're not.
Yep.
They're sucking you dry through taxes. They're beating the crap out of you in the streets. They're pulling people over and arresting them, stealing their property through asset forfeiture, all the things we write about. We only have, I'll be honest with you, a decade. If we don't get our act together, and again, it's going to take local governments.
Mm-hmm.
States are fine, but most states are not going to do it. I know one thing, because a lot of them are controlled by the corporate state.
Mm-hmm.
We need local places who just say, we're not going to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to have the FBI in here working with our local police, which they do, folks.
Oh, yeah.
And the FBI, by the way, is one of the most corrupt institutions that's ever existed on American soil. And so, well, what I'm saying is, it's we the people. The Constitution starts off, we the people. We are the government. Wait a second here. We're the government. That means we can kick butt when we want to, folks. But again, I say, do it peacefully, because they're getting ready for a possible rebellious group of people who are going to grab guns and fight back. And those are the people who will get mowed down.
Oh, yeah.
And the media will be calling them evil.
Well, and will be called domestic terrorists, insurrectionists, and anything like that. John Whitehead is on with us on the afternoon constitutional here from the Rutherford Institute. John, one of the things that you mentioned, the local governments, the first thing we have to do is start saying no to the money, because that's part of how they do it. They send you money for your schools, they send you money for your police, they send you money for your highway, and so if we can say no to that, and do it ourselves, then, like the Hillsdale College folks, then they can kind of run independently, because the only way they get you, it's like the old mobs where I grew up in New York. Once John Gotti lent you money, then they had you forever. And talk about being able to do that, John, and say no to the money.
Say no to the money is a good idea. I keep telling people that, because I've tried to work with some local governments, and I went, who in the world is controlling this? It isn't a local government. It's either run by big, huge corporations, mm-hmm. or the federal government, or some other entity outside dealing with it. And we need honest people in government. And it's going to take people who are willing to speak truth to power. And if your local mayor is quivering before whoever, what mm-hmm. great royalty or whatever great president, listen, presidents of the United States are run by the deep state, whether you believe it or not. If you're so foolish to think this guy's going to save us, this guy's going to save us, no, they're not. Who's going to save us is we, the people. Mm-hmm. And we've got to get our butts off, get off the couches, get down to local city council meetings, and take it over. And don't let them do this, folks. Get active and go, and teach your kids the Bill of Rights at home. Listen, they don't read the Declaration of Independence anymore. You know why they don't? You read the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. It says, we don't like the government. We can kick their butts out of here.
Right.
And we need to kick this government we got now. We need to kick this butt out of here and get the people back in charge. Otherwise, we're going to be a nation of zombies within 10 years, in my opinion. We're just going to be mowing along, following whatever dictates. And Hitler said that, by the way. He called it, the key to a ruler's success is a sleepwalking people. Mm-hmm. That's a quote.
Well, yeah, and you see what the Roman emperors did with the bread and circuses, and you just keep them entertained, and they're fine. John, and when we talk about the media, the corporate giants that control all this. I think when we fought back against centralized the what do they call it, the antitrust, the trust busters, and the people who broke up these big corporations 100 years ago when they were growing. We see it now too. Our retail is centralized, our automotive is centralized, our telecommunications are centralized. Are there people out there? And I think of another great Central Virginian, Joel Salatin, who works mostly in the agriculture world, but he's holding his Rogue Food Conference this very weekend over in Augusta County, where a bunch of people who have figured out ways to serve people food from their farms without having to go through the regulatory capture of these state and local and federal governments, especially the federal ones. Is that what we need? That kind of mindset of like, let's find the alternative marketplaces to all these big retail companies and manufacturing companies that control.
I think it's one important step. People don't realize it, but the Chinese government's bought like 100 billion acres of farmland. Bill Gates has as well. And they want to control what we eat and how we eat it. And that's another area that's really, really scary. If you've got people who are like demons with skin, they really bother me that they would want to do that to people.
Sure.
And when you again, they refer to the American people, by the way, and people around the world, some of these elites, as the herd.
Sure.
And they see us as cattle, the herd.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't see us as somebody that should be promoted to have freedom, because they don't want us to talk back. That's why we have a First Amendment, though. The people, James Madison, what did he say? The guy who wrote our Bill of Rights? We ought to mistrust all those in power.
Yep.
And that's the starting point, folks.
Well, and when you say mistrust them, I mean, they're supposed to be working for us. That Declaration of Independence says, and I heard this, several of folks as we talk about the southern border, kind of back to where we started, but, a couple of folks arguing with me, John, said, well, don't you conservatives believe that all men are created equal, your Declaration of Independence? And I said, I do believe that all people are endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, but it's on them to make a government that defends them. And I think we've forgotten that, is that all these rights that we want, President Biden said it in his re-election announcement, do you want more rights or do you want less rights? As if he could come up with new rights for us. And that's another one of those, Faustian choices. Oh, I want a right to a house. Oh, I want a right to an income. And what are you trading off in exchange for those rights? Your right for free speech, your right to private property, all the things Davos said in, what was it, 2019? You'll own nothing, you'll have no privacy, but everything will be great, won't it, John?
Yeah, they want to sleepwalking people, and the way that they're doing surveillance now, they're violating every right. We live in a total surveillance state, and we have a media, by the way, it's programming us to follow along. That's basically it, and we're going to have to, like I say, turn the mass media off if you can. Again,
right.
It's an addiction, and get up off your butts. Get together in your communities. Like I tell people, start civil liberties oversight committees. Get together with people and start a movement. It can start small, but listen, the freedom movement in this country, when the British were doing some of the most awful things to the American people, started off very small, and it grew because they educated the people on their rights. And we have to start educating our especially our young people on their rights. They don't know them, folks. The schools are not teaching it.
Well, and the ones that do know them think that they're somehow, demeaning to other people. It's only for special classes and things like that. And that, last one on the media. Here we are. We're on YouTube right now, and I'll probably get my first of 3 strikes, because the last time I got a strike was we discussed ivermectin and things like that. But just for having this conversation, I'm sure this video will go down at some point. So save it on your computer, kids. But we just watched the blow up of Tucker Carlson and Fox News, and his few releases since then have been about this very thing, about the lies you're told in the news, the lies of omission, the things that they're doing there. He's going to do a program, and it's going to be carried on Twitter, Elon Musk continues to want to portray Twitter as this free speech zone. I worry about giving one person that much control over what's called free speech. But for now, at least, it seems like he's trying to make a place where we can have these conversations. John, is that, or are we being duped in this as well?
Well, you don't know. That's what I'm saying. Use all avenues to speak truth to power, is what I tell people, and just get the word out there. But it's going to take human contact. That's why we have a Bill of Rights pamphlet. You can go to our website, Rutherford.org, download it, get it, and start learning the Bill of Rights. It's only 462 words. Know your Constitution. Hey, read that Declaration of Independence. If you read it all the way through, wow, it says all the bad things that the government was doing that day, they're doing the exact same thing now again.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I say we need a peaceful revolution. But you need people who are willing to get out there, put their lives on the line, and fight for truth. And that's what we need. But it's going to come through education, folks, and through people who are willing to take the time to step away from the TV set, go down to meetings, and get very active.
Well, and you mentioned that I read the usurpations in that legal filing known as the Declaration of Independence once on the air, and I had a lawyer friend of mine, John, say, be careful. This was shortly after January 6th. He said, in this mood right now, you could be called an insurrectionist for reading the Declaration of Independence. I said, wasn't that kind of the point of the Declaration of Independence? It was a legal filing saying under Magna Carta, we no longer recognize the king.
Hey, under the Biden administration now, getting into the area of disinformation, as they call it, disagreeing with the government, you can be labeled a domestic terrorist. That's how far it's gone. They're
arguing with a school board. Arguing
with
you're going to your school board meeting can get you labeled a domestic terrorist.
Yeah. I know I'm watched. Listen, I've had FBI agents meet with me and say, "Whoa." One actually looked at me before he walked out of the room and says, I'm surprised you're still alive. And I went, thanks for the warning. And he just looked at me with a big eyes and walked out. That happens across the country. You can call me a conspiracy theorist or whatever you want to call me, but I'm a conspiracy theorist that has everything footnoted in our commentary. So it's there. The facts are out there, folks. They're in your face. If you don't wake up, Hitler was right. We're part of the sleepwalking people that will bring tyranny.
Well, and that's what you have to look for is when you're searching the media. Don't just watch Tucker Carlson. Don't just watch this program. Don't just go to Rutherford.org. You have to kind of follow the trails all the way through, John, because you have to be your source of information. There's so much opportunity for it still out there on the internet. And you mentioned how we can be herded into this. Our next guest has actually written a play, a stage play about August 12th, 2017. And here's another place where we're told stories about what happened. I was there and I saw it. You've been the victim of character assassination. If anyone remembers James Carville's, hey, Doug, a $50 bill around the trail park, you know what you're going to get. That was this guy and his client at the time, Paula Jones, that Carville, Corporal Q-Ball, was talking about there. So we've all felt the brunt of character assassination. And I think the viewers and the listeners need to be steeled to the fact that they're going to call you names. They're going to call you things. You just have to be ready, like you said, reference everything, save everything so you can prove it, right?
Exactly. And get educated on the facts. Education precedes action. And you can do something, but learn your rights. Again, our website's a great place. My book, Battlefield America, goes into all this. You can use it as a guide to start a revolution in our country. We definitely need that revolution right now.
When you were writing that, one of my listeners came up with this expression. He says, "You're not a conspiracy theorist. You're a conspiracy analyst." Because you look at where we were, John, and you look at some of these things. Make 1984 fiction again. So much of this stuff. Who could have seen it except you? And Battlefield America was what, 9 years ago when you wrote that?
Yeah, 8 years.
So, I mean, we weren't even, a step down the gravel path yet.
I went into history, and as I saw history, I said, we're repeating it. I can't believe it. We're repeating it.
Well, thank you so much, sir. What are you working on right now as we get close to the end of our visit today? But what are you working on right now?
Commentaries. I just finished my novel, The Eric Blair Diaries, which goes into what I see the future coming, and a number of other projects. We're just trying to get the information out, and our podcasts and things like that. I'm trying to educate the public. Like I say, education precedes action. Get educated, folks, and don't get programmed if you can avoid it.
Well, thank you so much, John. I appreciate it, my friend, and have a great afternoon and happy Mother's Day weekend to you and to everyone in your world.
Thank you, sir.
When we come back in just a moment, we're going to talk about the Broadway. Well, not Broadway. Maybe it's Broadway bound. They put they put Hamilton on Broadway, but the Broadway play or the stage play that's been written about August 12th, 2017, in little old Charlottesville. So that is me, if you're watching at home. That is me on August 12th, 2017. And what has become the narrative is that because I was there in the crowd and not in some imaginary media area, I was a participant in the riots, not somebody who was just out there covering it for our radio station here in Charlottesville. And all of a sudden the show came to us again, and I didn't have a chance. Priyanka is in the studio with us, and I didn't get your last name. I'm sorry.
Shetty.
Priyanka Shetty is a playwright who has written a play about that day. And we were connected by a mutual friend, Sean McCord, who said she would like to talk to somebody who had a different perspective on the date. So first thing I want to ask you, Priyanka, is what drew you to the material and why a play instead of just blogs like everyone else writes about it?
Yeah, I think I, at that time, was an international student who had just come into the U.S. And, obviously, as an outsider, I wanted to understand, why the events of August 11th and 12th, 2017 transpired. And I was also closely involved with the community in Charlottesville and and I wasn't present here that summer. So having witnessed it from afar, I guess for a year I was waiting for somebody else to write a play about it because I really didn't think it should be my voice in any way. But then it was, I think, that fall of 2017 that we had a guest over who was a playwright, and he had written a play about the Matthew Shepard and the Laramie Project, and he was talking about their process as an ensemble, about how they would go into Laramie, Wyoming, and speak to the people there, and the voices that they centered were the community voices, and that felt like the right approach to me. Instead of somebody writing their words, I thought it should be verbatim theater.
Well, and certainly my wife and my mother didn't like that very much, that I decided to go right into it. But I felt like before, as we went through that summer, and it was building up to that rally, and then the date was as we got there, I said I have to be there, because I felt like this was going to be one of these stories that everyone was going to see third person. And somebody needed to be able to say, no, here's what happened, and in the timeline that it happened. And believe me, with pepper spray in your eye and tear gas in the air, it's a little tough to keep the timeline, so you have to keep pretty good notes and try to chronicle as best you can there for that horrific time. But I'm curious, so as a play, what does that give you the opportunity to do more of than just a report about it? And certainly, as I said, we were inundated with just reports about it, and everyone's told the story, and most of them get parts of it right, most of it wrong.
Yeah.
So as a play, what does that give you the opportunity to do with the story
Yeah.
of 2017?
That's a very important question because, I had seen a lot of the documentaries that came out at that time. I'd read a lot of the news articles that had come out. I'd seen news reports. And all of them focused on a very hour by hour, minute by minute factual sort of recreation of, the sequence of events. And most of us knew what the sequence of events were. Of course, there were maybe factual errors or whatever in the reporting, but I was more interested in the human side of things.
Sure.
What did people experience on those days, and how is this connected to the history of Charlottesville? Why did it happen here? And what are some of the things that have historically happened here in Charlottesville that led to it? And how have people who've been longtime residents of Charlottesville, how do they feel about August 11th and 12th and the events that led to it? So what I gained in the process of interviewing people was a very deep insight about America. And how...
That's a good thing.
Yeah. And Charlottesville, as one of the interviewees described, as a microcosm. And what happens here is reflective of what's happening in America.
Well, we are very much a melting pot. The university leads to that, but we have a lot of other industries here. We have a very strong military and government services section of the community, as well as some manufacturing. If you expand out Charlottesville a little bit to where a lot of us work, there's manufacturing. There are other things besides. There's logging. There's farming. All kinds of things that go on here. There's even still some shepherds, because that was our original industry in Charlottesville, was shepherding, was wool. So I'm imagining, because I haven't seen your play,
Yes.
and actually the play has been performed on stage in 2019?
Yeah, in April 2019, there have been two workshop productions. In April 2019, I presented an ensemble version of the play with multiple characters at Live Arts in Charlottesville, Virginia. And then during the pandemic in 2021, I even did a solo version of the play where I played myself and I also played the interviewees.
Okay, and was that online, as so much was being done
Yes,
online?
it was a hybrid. There were few people socially distanced in the audience, and then it was live streamed.
So what was the reaction to, first, when you told your friends, I'm going to write a play about those riots in Charlottesville? Did your friends say to you, can't you find, write something funny, write a musical or something? What was their reaction to that?
They were very supportive of the fact, because all of us agreed that there needs to be, that's the whole purpose of art, right? Is to be a reflection of our times. And the resistance I really faced was, from the department that I was studying at. They said, there are some things that are best left alone, is what I got.
Isn't that, though, if you're studying the theater arts or any storytelling, isn't that always the case where somebody's saying, no, we're not going to tell that story? And those are usually the stories that need to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt that it was important for it to exist in the format of a play. And going back to your question about why, a play as opposed to a book or a documentary, I think plays allow us to reflect in real time. And there's something very raw and immediate and powerful about it as a live art form. Theaters can be very powerful, and sure, it cannot offer you solutions in an hour, but it can leave you asking the right questions.
When you stopped and started to kind of go through the interviews and go through the process, I mean, there's some very tragic parts of the day. Obviously, the loss of the 2 state troopers and the protester, and the grievous injuries of many people that came towards the end of it. Was it hard to get people to share their stories with you or to talk about it, or did you find that people were more looking for somebody to tell their story to?
It wasn't hard. There was a vetting process. People did some of them wanted to meet me first, get an idea of what my intentions were. And my intention really was to center the voices of the community. And, many of them were forthcoming and eager. And eager for it to exist in the format of a play as well. I don't think anyone explicitly refused to be interviewed, but they wanted to know who else I was interviewing, you know, and rightfully so, you know, for them to understand what's the intention behind this.
Now, you and I know when we were connected, it was told that you should have somebody with my perspective. Now, that's not something that makes my antenna go up. I always get bemused when somebody says that, because I'm kind of curious what they're all thinking my perspective is on it. And we're going to go through after the show is done. She's going to sit down with me, and I'm going to become the interview guest, and she's going to add my story a little bit to this, I guess, my perspective of it. But as you went through it, did you try to find people that were in the park, people that were out on the street, people that were on the University of Virginia grounds? You know, did you try to find a mixed bag of
Absolutely.
some of those folks?
Yeah, so it represents, the voices in the play represents a lot of the people who were right there and who were witness to everything that happened. I did not, by choice, interview any members of the alt-right or neo-Nazis. And it really represents the voices of the people in Charlottesville, no matter how varied, but the voices of the community members.
Well, you use the phrase that pays, and part of my, and will always be my recollection of that summer, I refer to it as our summer of discontent. As a playwright, you'll appreciate the line, I hope. But so our summer of discontent, in my mind, will always revolve around an almost unending effort on my part to correct people who would call them the right or the alt-right even. They self-titled themselves because when David Duke walked past me, you know, as close as you are to me, I went, what? He's definitely not the right. And I finally had at least a piece of evidence to say, look, these people were not what we would consider conservatives, though they were out there calling themselves that. So that is one of the hardest parts for me of this, was to explain that the people in the park were not indicative of even conservative people from around here. And as a matter of fact, during the riot, while a young lady from, I think she was there, believe it or not, with Antifa, she was going around with bottles of milk. So as the pepper spray flew fairly liberally, I didn't know this, found this out at the time, that milk in your eyes will get rid of the pepper spray. So I'm pouring milk in my eyes, and one of my listeners from my radio program comes up to me and says, Joe, what the hell is going on in there? They're talking about, you know, Jews and blood and soil, and David Duke is talking. I said, go home. I said, you were, because they were told this was going to be a free speech rally, and it was anything but. And many people, by the time the rioters were sent away from the park, and there's a big part of the story that I've told my listeners chapter and verse for, but as they were being sent out of the park, there were not that many of them left. I mean, maybe there's 50. It was not that big of a crowd, because people got there, heard what was going on, and said, that's not what I was told, and they left. And so many people had left the scene by the time the rioting really ensued there. So I'm imagining almost sort of so almost like our town meets a few good men. When I think, you know, I mean the Broadway play. If you, I'm seeing something sort of like that. How does your play go, and where can people see it again next?
There's a reading of it that's coming up in Charlottesville, first 3 days of June 1st to 3rd.
Oh, okay.
And that represents the version, it's similar to the version that was presented in 2019.
Okay, great.
And I'm actually in town because I'm collecting more interviews, and I'm continuing the developmental research around this, and including, because it's been 5 to 6 years since, and a lot has transpired since then, and there are some gaps in the narrative in terms of, you know, the monuments and the trial, and there is another solo version which hopefully will incorporate more of this happening in DC in the month of July.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, Priyanka, is there a Facebook group that people can follow you to find out more about the play or your plays in general, so that, as people go away from here, they can say, oh, I want to follow her and keep in touch with her work?
You can look up my website, priyankashetty.com, which I try to keep updated as much as possible with all of the shows coming up. So if you're interested in seeing it or being at the reading, you're welcome to check out my website.
Do you have a venue for the reading yet? Or?
Yes, it's at the Gibson Theatre at Live Arts.
Oh, okay. All right. So back at Live Arts. Thank you for tuning in again today on the Afternoon Constitutional, our reboot here, thanks to John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute, who kicked us off this afternoon. And for all of us here, so long, and thanks for all the fish.